It's Thursday, and it is a special Thursday indeed, because today is episode number 10 of More About Storytelling. I can't believe I'm already into the double digits. What a journey this has been. And what better person to bring on for today's interview than the man who got me started on this podcasting journey, Jason Hewlett, co-founder of the Canadian Paranormal Society, filmmaker and author, and all-around super cool guy. But don't take my word for it. Let's go and learn more about Jason.
Once upon a time,
in a galaxy far, far away,
it was a dark and stormy night.
gather round, my friends. Let me tell you a story.
You know, it's quite a challenge for me to try to consider where to begin my story about Jason. How he came into my life was completely by accident. Just, on a whim, came into a store I was working at thinking about getting into archery, and I happened to be the gentleman to help him get him sorted out. Did some coaching with him, found out we had everything in common. Boom, instant friendship. That's the Coles notes of our journey. But as our friendship grew, and we started, spending a little more time together, drinking in the beers in the pub and stuff, and just chatting with one another about intellectualism and shared interests, I came up with this idea one day, and I pitched to him. I said, I've been thinking about doing this podcast. It's something I've always been interested in, but I've always been afraid to pull the trigger. And at the time, Jason was co-hosting a podcast called the Into Greatness podcast, which was a mental health focused podcast with his therapist friend, Jolene. And I was following it and I loved it. So I pitched to Jason this idea I had to explore phobias and fear and how it affects storytelling, like how different phobias show up for us in the course of human history and the stories we tell. And boom, the Echoes of Fear was born. And Jason was fantastic, kind of took me under his wing, showed me the ropes, so to speak, of the podcasting world. And with his radio background and all that kind of stuff, it was just an excellent journey. He brought me to Enderby LitCon. He got me into that convention and introduced me to Ocean and Lindsay and all of the other people that I've become friends with. He's just been one of those guys that come into your life, one of those friends that come into your world and shake everything up. Like they show you what's possible and they inspire you. And it's amazing. And, Jason is the co-founder of the Canadian Paranormal Society. He's a very prolific individual with a lot of accomplishments under his belt that he should be very proud of, from writing and crime journalism to publishing 5 books now. He co-wrote 2 books with his Canadian Paranormal Society colleague Peter Wren, Dying Light, I Want to Believe. 3 books with Peter Wren, the 2 I Want to Believes and Dying Light. And now he's written The Legend of Ogopogo and most recently Heart of Ice, Tracking the Wendigo, which I'm reading very soon. And I can't wait because I've loved everything that he's written to date. We did a Sasquatch documentary together where I shared with him a encounter I didn't see, but the person I was with in the bush had a direct confrontation, and I was like a bystander, so to speak. I'm a skeptic, but I am fascinated by lore and mythology, as you probably well know. I love mysteries. I love answering the questions that we have so many questions, but no answers. And I love discussing them. Obviously, my interests lie a little bit deeper in the maritime world, whereas Jason is very much a man of the mountains. And it's awesome. We just pair well together. We have a good kinship. And if any of you have ever listened to us on the Echoes of Fear podcast, which sadly is on hiatus right now because both of us are working on different things, you can catch Jason hosting the Paranormal Theories show on Sandcastle Radio, which is online. You can listen to it through the sandcastle.org app, or you can find the Paranormal Theories podcast, which Jason shares the day after it goes live on Sandcastle. And I guest on there sometimes and talk about fear. So anyways, I could yak about this forever and talk about his accomplishments and all the things he's done, but let's let him tell his own story. So here we go. All right. So more about storytelling welcomes Jason Hewlett, probably one of my favorite friends that I've met in recent days, in terms of like creative people. But yeah, man, Jason, welcome to the show. How's it going?
Good, man. Thanks so much for having me on. I have enjoyed listening to your past episodes. I'm not all caught up, but I've been working my way through them, and they've been very good.
Oh, what an honor, man. I appreciate that. That's super cool to hear. So I get, yeah, you're familiar with the story, like what this podcast's all about. And I know you yourself, you have an absolutely fantastic story. Like, do you want to just tell us a bit, like how does story manifest for you in your life? Like where does your story, where does the story of Jason Hewlett begin?
I have no idea.
Wow,
I wouldn't even know how to describe it. I mean, when I was a kid, I guess where it really kind of started, at least in terms of my love of story, is that when I was young, like, I'd say probably old enough to comprehend right through till I was too old for such things. Every night before bed, my dad would read me Charlie Brown books.
Nice.
Good and ones. That really, really kicked off just my interest in stories. Because the beautiful thing with Charlie Brown and those comic strips, and I don't read comic strips anymore, just because I can't find any I enjoy. But they wouldn't just be like one panel things, or like there'd be the 3 blocks and then the story was done. Like they'd have things that would go on for like days and weeks, these ongoing things. So you kind of learned story that way and how to continue a story. And then being dyslexic, when my parents found out I was dyslexic, it was like, well, we could focus on like teaching him how to read and write, or we could focus on like the science or mathy stuff. And they figured reading and writing would serve me better overall. Mm-hmm. And so they did. So anything I was interested in, they bought me books about. So, I mean, I liked Star Wars. So I had like Star Wars comics and Star Wars books and picture books. I was into dinosaurs, so they bought me dinosaur stuff. I was into Spider-Man and superheroes, so they bought me comic books and anything related to that. And that's kind of where I learned story. And I would then, because I loved comics, I'd create my own comics. And I'd write stories based on characters of people who existed, and eventually created my own characters. So, and then got slowly into books and things like that as I got older and sort of my reading skills developed, etc. And the first book I can remember reading cover to cover was the novelization for The Empire Strikes Back, which I think was Alan Dean Foster, who did all of those kind of novelizations from scripts. And then it just went from there. It just went from there.
I have him on my shelf. He's a good one. Foster's
he's great. Oh yeah, he's and the beautiful thing about him is he did all those books, plus he just wrote books like on top of it. Right?
Yeah, just prolific, right?
Yeah.
It's actually cool. Speaking of Star Wars, a little bit of a segue there, but I'm doing this 2026 reading challenge with some friends this year where I got to do like alphabet, right? And I was going through my TBR and I was like, oh my God, how many of these do I actually have in my TBR? And the letters I was the most worried about, like Q, X, Z, right? I ended up having Z on my shelf, and it was Timothy Zahn, like the heir to the Empire series. And I hadn't gotten around to reading them, so I was so excited to put that on my list.
When you read it, let me know what you think, because I've read them and I have my opinions, but I don't want to say anything now.
Oh, okay, fair.
Yeah.
I will remember to let you know. I'll remember to let you know. So let's talk a bit about Jason. Like you in story, you were a crime journalist for a long time, so you've spent most of your life in the truth, right? Like
Yeah.
the side of nonfiction storytelling. As a fan, obviously, you're very into fiction, but as a creator, more nonfiction. How do you think that's like changed your view of story? Like, do you find that retelling what already happened easier or more difficult in some ways? Or
Some ways it's more difficult, because you're looking at a real experience, and this was especially true with like news writing, because news writing is literally providing people with facts, and there's the inverted pyramid. So you start with the most broad information and work your way down into funneling it into finite stuff. At least that's how I learned it. Now it's just this BS morass of crap, as far as I'm
mm,
concerned. Modern journalism writing.
spin,
Um,
the
yeah, it's
spin.
spin and
Yeah.
it's doom scroll and it's all slanted like that. That whole like non-bias, both sides of the story thing has gone completely out the window. But that's how I started, is in that world, and also in the world where you had time to write like good stories. You know what I mean? And we called them stories. They were news stories, but they were about news. So it would be finding like, but then a lot, because I wrote crime, so some stuff made sense. There is a murder, much like we're
Mm,
experiencing in town right now. And so you
yeah.
went in and
Yeah.
found as much facts as possible and then related in a way that would be a narrative so that people could try to understand what was happening. And in the case of like a murder or some tragedy, you would try to find out the identity of the person. So it wasn't just a statistic, but a person. And you'd try to humanize it that way. And a lot of people hated you for it because they thought you were being a ghoul. Whereas what I was
Mm,
trying to do is find out who this person was, because the person mattered. Like the people involved in all these things mattered. Like it's like any story is worthless without a good characters.
yeah.
And so
Right.
in a real in nonfiction, you're trying to find real people, make them characters so that readers care about what's going on. Um, and that can be really, really hard. Like, because
Oh,
you
for
know what I
sure.
mean? Really
Yeah. 'Cause
hard.
some people are just dicks.
But some people are, and
Mm,
and then I lost track. Like every time someone died in an accident, everyone remembered them as being these wonderful human beings.
yeah.
And it was interesting. You'd see that, right? It was just, so things change when people die. Um, but yeah, it was a challenge. I mean, sometimes it's easier because you don't have to like dream anything up. It's all there for you, laid out. But you have to then take that information and turn it into some kind of narrative so people can understand it and try to humanize it by making these people into real, for lack of a better word, characters in
Hmm.
these stories. And you'd sometimes they'd be one-offs, and sometimes these stories would go on for days or weeks. Good journalism, I don't think they do it much anymore, but you could write like really in-depth features. Like you'd get lots of time to write these really expansive multi-part features, which you then almost creating this longer narrative arc. You know what I mean? Like I did something on
Yeah.
gang activity in Kamloops. It was like a 3 or 4 parter, and it was awesome to have the time to do that and just find all these
Wow.
different players and dig into it and get their stories and because it matters to the community when these
Yeah.
things are happening in our town. And so there was a lot of pressure, there was a lot of weight, it was very stressful, it wasn't always very pleasant, it left a lot of scars for me, like emotionally and mentally, but I learned a lot about how to tell real stories from that 10-year experience.
That's really cool. And it, like perfect segue into the next part here is like one of my favorite stories between you and I was actually how we met. Right?
Yeah.
Like when when you came into Horse Barn thinking about how I want to try getting into archery one day, and you came in and I just happened to be the guy to sell you a bow, and then I offered to coach you, and when we were out shooting we just got to talking, and I found out like your activity with the paranormal investigations there, the Canadian Paranormal Society, all your investigations, that we had so much in common. It was just like awesome, like such an instant friendship, a bromance, as I like to refer to a lot of my friends. I was like, that is such a bromance with this guy, right? But when with your journalism, how did that affect your paranormal investigations? Like how did that affect that side of your life?
Well, I think it's funny because the two really went hand in hand. Like I was always interested in, subjects of the paranormal, but I didn't really do, and I'd have like experiences and we'd kind of like half-assed investigate them, not knowing what to do. But my first real paranormal investigation occurred in 2003 when I was in a magazine writing class. And we had a whole semester to write one article, which is like
Oh,
mind blowing, because that's so not the reality in the real world when you're doing this.
2 hours.
Yeah, 2 hours if you're lucky. Um, but I was like you could pick any magazine to write for, and could write a story about it, and then the idea was in the end that you would end up submitting it if possible, and having it picked up. And I was like, I don't know, and I was just like, love the Fortean Times, which is a magazine out of the UK that focuses. They've been doing it for decades on paranormal and high strangeness. So I was like, yeah, I'm going to do that, because that's just, no one else in this class is going to do that. Like, no one, I knew everyone else was doing like a sports magazine or Maclean's or Harper or Elle or something like that. And I'm like, I'm going to go all in, and I'm going to do something for the Fortean Times. And so I knew about Tronquil Sanitarium, which is a former tuberculosis clinic, mental institution here in Kamloops, closed in the 80s, and it has a long history of like spooky stuff, urban legendy,
Hmm.
spooky stuff. So I'm like, and I knew someone that had been out there and had an experience. So I'm like, I'm going to write an article about that. And the way I'm going to do it is I'm going to get this guy's story, and I'm spending a night. And I'm going to find a skeptic, a
Awesome.
psychic, and someone to document it for me with like television cameras. And so that's what we did. And I knew the caretaker back then. So he's like, yeah, sure, come on in, spend the whole night. Like, it was effortless. Now they won't even let you near it because it's different people.
Wow.
So
Wow.
I did my research, and I spent a whole night there, and not much happened, but it was fun. It was fun. I was out there with my buddy Sean, who does the music for everything I do. Uh, Trevor Rockcliffe, who sadly since passed away, but he worked for Shaw Cable, and he had all this audio and video equipment. Buddy of mine in the program named Lachlan LeBert, who's a total skeptic about it all. And then this other gal, and her name's gonna mistake, Donna, who was alleged psychic. And so we
Hmm.
had like this whole experience, and it was a lot of fun. And it was like we did as much of an investigation as you could, and that's kind of where the two came together. And so when I finally did start investigating with Pete Wren in 2017, like I did my own investigations after that, but then when I really joined a team, which at the time was Vancouver Paranormal Society, that's where I met Pete Wren.
Hmm.
I could take a lot of it and apply it, because to do good investigation, you've got to do good research ahead of time. You got to find out the history of the place, the players involved, what their backgrounds are like, if you can, and just apply all these things. Then also take this very journalistic eye to the events after the fact, and first try to pick them apart and see if it's
Right.
a real logical explanation, and then apply Occam's razor to whatever's left, kind of thing. And so my journalism is hugely influential to being an investigator.
That's wild. Yeah, and so what are you up to now? You're at 5 books now, right? Correct me if I'm wrong.
Hang on.
You've got
Yeah, five, just started researching six today.
right. Yeah, so 5 books, 2 documentaries, TV series, like pretty prolific, especially within the last few years, with your involvement in Small Town Monsters and all that Sandcastle Radio and like got all this kind of stuff on the go. And it really shows like that skill, that level of research shows in your work. I mean, I know I've personally read We Want to Believe, the first one. I haven't read the second one yet. And then I've got Heart of Ice queued up on my reading list for this year. You're lucky enough to be my H.
I saw that. Thank you.
And it shows in your writing, like the level of research, and also like, for the listeners, I was fortunate enough to be able to share one of my own personal encounter stories with Jason for his recent documentary, Sasquatch Legacy, correct?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes, you were
which
like
is,
kind of the focal point of it, like the wraparound story focal point of the documentary, which it
yeah, I
was
know.
fantastic to have
Oh,
something newer and recent, you know what I mean? Newer and local, to really dig into. Yeah.
yeah, and that was wild. Like I won't spoil anything for the listeners. Go and have a look at it. You can find it on YouTube. But we encountered some pretty unsettling things, and we're talking kilometers from my house.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like,
Mere kilometers in a straight arrow, straight line, when you look at
yeah.
it on a map. Like,
Yeah, which is, it's been interesting, but to say the least. So, like where I come from with all this kind of stuff personally is, I consider myself a skeptic, but more along the lines of I'm very curious. Um, I'm very open to belief systems, and I'm driven by the question of what if all the time. Like ghosts, do they exist? Do they not exist? What are they? What aren't they? What if, right? And the what if drives me Is that very similar to your own experience? Like, is that what drives you to all of this in the research as well?
Yeah, like because you have experiences, then you want to understand them, right? And figure out what it was. And I don't like to believe blindly in anything. Like I like to be able to back it up with stuff. you
Right.
know? um, and there's been stories told about this like all over the world. Like every culture has ghost stories. Every culture has a Harry Wildman story. Lake monsters are seen all over the world. So there's got to be something to it. Um, and I think, do I believe in all these things? I don't know, but I've had enough experience, especially in the realm
Yeah.
of like ghosts and stuff, where I do. There's something to it. I like what it is. Is it like the spirit of the dead? Are we touching on a different dimension? Is it like because time is a flat circle and you can, there's something going on there. And having done Sasquatch for a while now, I'm convinced people are finding something out in the woods. Is it like a hairy ape? Is it like a lost species? Is it like just a whole bunch of misidentification? Right? That seems a
Yeah.
bit far fetched for me. But like the titles are, like I want to believe. Like I want to believe in these things. I think they are fascinating subjects. They are literally stories of our planet, and
Right.
so digging into that and unraveling it is to me fascinating. And every time I get an answer to something, 20 more questions pop up. So it just keeps pulling me along.
Yeah, and the fascinating thing too, and I don't know, you can agree or disagree, but the fascinating thing for me is like when you get into these mysteries and you start researching them, and the fact that there hasn't been definitive proof yet means that you still have an option for contribution, and that's
Yes.
exciting. That's like that human need to explore. So that's similar, obviously, for you?
Similar, obviously. And it's like, I think like Mark Matsky in Sasquatch Legacy, he kind of talked a lot about John Green in it. He was a
Hmm.
gentleman with the glasses. And at the end, he kind of says anyone that researches Sasquatch or any kind of stuff, like without like subconsciously, you harken back to someone like John Green, who, well, you're exploring this stuff and then you want to share what you find and share your experiences so other people can kind of make up their own minds about it, right? And that's kind of also drives me. Like I see myself as like a truth seeker slash sharer of knowledge.
Hmm.
Um, and so that's kind of the point of it. Like you know, as a storyteller, doing like something like Sasquatch Legacy was a great opportunity because I could tell your story. I could tell the story of all these guys that have been investigating forever. I could touch on the indigenous side of it. Then I could mash it all together and put it out there in a way that people can then take this information and do what they want with it. And that's
Yeah.
kind of how I've always approached it. And that's how I approached journalism. I'm passing on this information so other people can be informed or make a decision based on what I'm sharing. I don't hold any real ownership to any of it.
Right.
I'm passing it along.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. You're sort of like documenting all these
Yeah,
experiences of different people and telling a story out of it, like maintaining a
e-
narrative.
exactly, exactly. 'Cause that's just a way that we understand things.
Yeah,
Like you could
and
put a bunch of bullet points and people won't dissect it, but if you put it into some sort of narrative, people will.
yeah, yeah. They tend to be able to follow it easier.
Yeah,
Yeah, and it's cool. Like that's one thing I've always liked about your work, especially the documentary stuff, is that you don't try to um, present a definitive answer. You try to present the facts and the stories and the real life accounts, and then leave it open to the audience for interpretation to decide, like what do you think, and Sasquatch Legacy, Tracking the Wendigo, even Ogopogo, they all seem to have that same sort of thing, and that's fascinating. It's one of the things I've always loved about your work.
well, I appreciate that because that to me is what a documentary is. Like there are things that they call themselves quote unquote air quotes here documentaries, but it's pushing a point of view or a
Hmm.
perspective. I mean, what's his name who did Bowling for Columbine? Mike Moore. I think that was his
Michael
name.
Moore.
Mike.
Yeah,
Uh,
Michael Moore. Yeah.
Michael Moore. He started off being more of a documentarian, and then he had an agenda to push. And you're
Right.
no longer a documentary filmmaker. Then I like Michael Moore's stuff, but you know
Yeah.
what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's so to me, I'd rather just make a documentary and let people come up to their own conclusions. That's why I like working for small town monsters because that's what they do. They don't say these are all real and blah blah blah. It's left open for
Hmm.
you. Where there's shows on television that take these slants, and they're like the ghost shows is like yes, there's ghosts and there's demons and all this
Yeah.
stuff, and
And
that's
here's
not
what
that.
they are. And
Yeah, that
You can fight them with salt and iron.
yeah, and all this stuff, right? So yeah, I definitely would rather just present information and let people come to their own conclusions.
Which is so cool, man. That's
Thank you.
super cool. Yeah, and being very successful too. I saw your post recently on social media that both of your recent documentaries are like 90,000 plus views on YouTube. That's quite impressive considering a month, 2 months, of release.
I was kind of blown away by that, actually. Like, I mean, yeah, like Sasquatch Legacy's been out a month and it's at 101,000 as of today, which I thought that was wild. And then Wendigo, like tracking the Wendigo's been out since before Halloween. And I thought, I thought it would peak because it kind of did really well. And I figured, oh, it's done at around 47, 49. I was happy with that. Like that was my first ever crack at anything like it. And it's still, people are
Going.
still
Yeah.
watching it and discovering it. And that feels really, really good. And then to have something
Yeah.
across 100,000, I mean, that doesn't just happen all the time. Ever.
No, and it's a feat in our day and age, when you think about that, the viewership and all that. But beyond the viewership, what's most impressive too is the discussion that both shows have started, like in the comments and on social media and stuff. That it's been probably a wild ride for you. Like, do you spend any time looking at any of the comments that people are leaving on there and just
I
being
do
like,
initially, like the first week, I like to sit down and if people are nice, I'll respond to them. Like, you know what I mean? And then and you and I talked about this when we went out for lunch before Christmas, and some of them you just shake your head at. It's like, did you even watch the film? And take anything from it. And then other people just like to go on there and be dicks about things because they can. And a lot of people just like spout off their own ideas and they don't care what you're saying. Like they're just using it
right?
as a platform for themselves. But it's neat to go on and look, and that the people who seem to really enjoy them and appreciate them for what they are and the information. And a lot of people are happy that Canada is actually being featured. Like
Hmm.
a lot of this, and STM is an American company, but they see the value in the Canadian stories and the number of them up here. And so I think like those two are one of the few real Canadian focused
Yeah.
documentaries of their kind out there, at least that are new,
Yeah,
which is
which
neat.
like that's cool too because that was one of our conversations when we met for lunch recently too. Is it was talking about how little exposure some of the Canadian lore and mythology has.
Yeah.
Like when you talk about things like cryptids specifically, like Dundas Island Blackfly, Cadborosaurus, the Wahila. All those kind of different cryptid monsters around our country that have so little exposure.
Yeah, and they do, and it's a shame. And part of it is, I think, just our culture in Canada and our approach to these things and our approach to history. Like in the States, they just love it, and they'll. It's not hard to get into these places to investigate. In fact, they did a lot of them, like Waverly Sanitarium. They want you to, and you can pay
Yeah,
money to
they
do
just
it.
invite you.
They just invite you, and in Canada, not so much. More so in Eastern Canada, I think, because it's older and they seem to appreciate the history more. But definitely out here in the West, there just isn't a we just want to shove it under the rug and not talk about it. And we seem to do it with our history anyways. Like we're bulldozing the old historical buildings and putting new ones up, etc. So I think it's just part of the mindset here. So
Tearing
to be
down
able to do that
statues.
is great.
Yeah, and so what's one of your favorite like uh Canadian mythologies around here? Like what's one of your favorite investigations you've been able to do?
Oh, I thought Wendigo was neat, just because I was fascinated with it as a kid. I remember reading The Incredible Hulk. It was the first appearance of Wolverine, and they both fought the Wendigo, which was like
Right?
looked more like a hairy Bigfoot with a white Bigfoot with a tail, than anything. And they glossed over the cannibalistic aspect of it. I think it was mentioned, but it wasn't like played up. And so
Right.
as a kid, I was fascinated by it, and I would draw my own Wendigo comics and make him a villain in my comics too. And then as I got older, I realized, holy cow, like these are real stories that Marvel is adapting into these things. And I just time went on, and I remember it was after making Cursed Waters, and I didn't have much to do, and I was kind of deciding, well, what do I want to do next? And I was just sort of researching the Wendigo, and I was researching the Cadborosaurus at the same time. And I was talking with Eli Watson, who directed Cursed Waters, and we are having a post-production meeting. It was ahead of the documentary coming out and the book. And just in the middle of the conversation, Eli's like, "So what are you going to write next?" And I just went, the Wendigo. just,
Just just dropped it right there and right then and
just
there,
right
eh?
there. And he's like, well, we're thinking of making a Wendigo movie next year. You should talk to Heather. And it just, the way it all came together was like very fast. And yeah, just to be able to go to Edmonton, Alberta, where this story was really born in that area,
Yeah.
and do the research with Morgan Knudsen and Michael Brown and Alicia Perot Werner and hear their experiences was awesome. And just to see how seriously it's taken to this day
Mhm.
up there in northern Alberta,
Yeah,
and
it's
just the
one of
sheer
those
volume of
things
stories.
they don't even really want to talk about it, hey? Like you know, you mentioned I think in the documentary that to even mention the name sometimes is to call it into your life, right? Like
Yes, yeah, that was a bit, and they still believe that. So
yeah.
that was a favorite investigation of mine. And then once I was sort of brought on to actually make the film, because it originally was going to be someone else, and it went through a few hands, and then they just realized we need to do this because we have this book and we want it out by Halloween. We need to make it. And Seth Breedlove, who runs Small Town Monsters, like, do you want to do it? And I'm like, sure, not realizing how I would do it because I hadn't some of the material I had filmed, not intending that to so much be in a documentary, but more for my own reference points. And I knew there was going to be a film, so I figured I'd shoot some interviews because they wouldn't be able to come up here and do it. But I didn't think it would actually, I would make it and have to figure out how to put it together. So when that happened, I decided, because there's this local sighting here in near Kamloops, that was going to be the wraparound story for tracking what became tracking the Wendigo. So my buddy Ollie and my friend Sean and I actually went and did an investigation, and that was a lot of fun
Oh
to
yeah.
film that. And we did it all in like a day. Um, Very rushed feeling, but it turned out really good. And we had stuff happen that was it Wendigo? I don't think so, but
Yeah.
it
Hard to
added
say.
up nicely, to be a good part of the film and become a good wraparound story.
Man, that's awesome. You know, like that's awesome. And it's cool too that you did that because like Wendigo was the story, the mythology, I guess, the lore, let's say, that really started to get or like pique my interest in mythology, like into why humans tell these stories to each other. You know, and the further I got into it, the more I started learning about how so much of lore and mythology is the never cry wolf, right? It's a story meant to frighten you or to elicit a response or to modify the behavior of a society or a culture. Like with Wendigo being specifically focused on cannibalism, like anti-cannibalism messaging, you know, the Little Red Riding Hood being don't trust wolves in the dark. Like
Mm-hmm.
it's fascinating and I love it. The more I got down that path, the more interested I became in all these things. So, to have a friend who's so close to me both physically and like, connected wise, that's doing and looking into the things that interest me has just been awesome.
No, I appreciate that. And
Inspiring.
that's always something I've enjoyed chatting, with you about is these stories and just how important they are to our society. Because even Sasquatch really is kind of, and depending on which indigenous tribe you talk to, it was a cautionary tale too. Like, don't go out in the woods because you'll get spirited away by Sasquatch. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like,
Respect it. Respect the
respect
woods.
it, respect the forest, respect the environment. Ogopogo is the same thing. Respect the water. Take care of the water, take care of the planet, and it will take
Hmm.
care of you. And if you don't, bad things can happen. Yeah, so all these stories are basically tied into that. And then it's just been interesting how we've taken them and adapted them and turned
Yeah,
them into
right. And
something else.
and that's something that you and I had a lot of fun doing with our podcast, The Echoes of Fear, too, where we were examining not only these fears and phobias, but also their impact on pop culture.
Oh
And
yeah.
and I bet, with you being a pop culture fanatic as well, too, you probably when you go out and you research Wendigo, learning the truth about it, learning the truth about the lore and everything like that, how much of that made you think about Marvel's Wendigo or the Wendigos from Until Dawn,
Oh
like
yeah. And what's funny is that the Wendigos in Until Dawn are more accurately portrayed to how they look historically. They're not like antlered things, which is more the modern
right.
bit, right? They look almost more like rakes. You know what I mean? Like the rake with like they're bald and pale and skeletal and thin. Um, But it was just neat to see that them in a video game, like the Wendigos. You even have a character in it named Jack Fiddler, who is like a real life Wendigo hunter out in Eastern Canada. Yeah, just how they've been adapted into these different facets, and even with like Sasquatch and how it's been portrayed, like the $6 million man had Sasquatch. You know what I mean? And there was
Right.
like a
Yeah.
Harry and the Hendersons. How they've taken these things and turned them into something else.
Yeah. The de-evolution books too, very focused
Yeah,
on Sasquatch too, like
yeah, from the
Rainier
Mount St.
Mountain
Helens, where there's
explosion.
real
Yeah.
Sasquatch activity in and around Mount St. Helens, right to this
Yeah.
day.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and then you get like Bigfoot and all this kind of stuff. It's, and it's great. Harry and the Hendersons.
Oh yeah, like huge, right?
So, what about like vampires and werewolves, man? Are you into that kind of stuff too? More of the European folklore? Or is it just
Uh,
more North American focus interests you more?
I mean, it's interesting. I think they're interesting. I mean, I guess werewolves could be basically tied into the loup garou that we have here in Canada, and dogman, which is being spotted. A lot of people say those dogmen are basically werewolves.
Hmm.
Um, I've not
Skinwalkers.
seen one, so I don't know, but a lot of people sure believe in it. And there's just cases popping up all the time. Vampires, I think less so vampires. I think more though because of how they have been portrayed. I don't believe there aren't vampires. Like there's not. Like, you know what I mean?
Mm.
They're more of a mythology from Europe, and they've been turned into books and stories and stuff like that. I mean, I used to find the whole idea of vampires fascinating, and now I think it's just because of Twilight and all these other
Yeah,
things.
yeah,
It just ruined the interest in it for me.
yeah,
Um, and it's also something that is more just pop culture to me now than
yeah.
anything else. Like,
And that's a good point too, because like I've always found like I've always been unable to associate myself with the stories of vampires. I mean, like real life stories like Dracula, Vladimir Count
Vlad the Impaler.
Vlad the Impaler. Thank you. God, I was just gapping on his name there. Vlad the Impaler, Elizabeth Bathory, like these real life stories that were attributed to vampirism, they sort of fascinate me, but I've always not been able to really connect with them because I find that vampirism is so heavily connected to Western theology, like Christianity and stuff and demonology, that it just doesn't really interest me. Where things like skinwalkers and werewolves that are more, I guess, some of them in a way more atheistic and connected to the land and things we don't understand, I find them way more fascinating.
Well, they're cross-cultural, right? Like you had like the early werewolf stories of lycanthropy, like the Beast of Gévaudan,
Right?
which
France,
which is made into a really great movie called Brotherhood of the Wolf.
awesome
Um,
movie.
it was awesome. It was so good, man. Far obviously removed from I'm sure the real event, but it's no one knows what it was, but they attributed it to a werewolf. And
Yeah,
so you've got these things where it's really, I hate to say really documented, but it is in some way,
right.
shape, or form documented. And then the stories came over to North America, and there was like the loup garou, and then the rougarou down in the southern United States. So these stories have become they're not just limited to one thing, and yeah, like this the skinwalkers and such. So there's native lore even that you can attribute to it and tie into it. And I guess you could even in a way throw in something like the Wahila,
Hmm.
from the
Yeah,
Nahanni Valley into it because it's a giant wolf-like bear
bear
thing,
dog thing. Yeah,
right?
yeah, and that's just it. Like modern cryptid research is leaning heavily towards it being one of those living fossils, like
Dire
amphision, I
wolf.
think is what they call
Yeah,
a dire wolf. Yeah, and
yeah.
then you've got like Inuit legend that believes it's a demon spirit that eats the heads of people lost in the snow, right? So
Yeah, exactly. Which is, I think, also very cool. I wouldn't want to run into one, but it's very
no,
cool.
no, no, me neither. But yeah, no, it's all cool, and that's what I mean. I love about this kind of stuff is the why, is the what if, is asking the what if, and for me, it's more about the why did we tell these stories? Like, what did they come from? What was the intent to begin telling them? Like I know wolves and humankind have spent you know, eternity at odds with one another, especially once we started reaching agricultural stage and we're domesticating animals like sheep. You get these,
Mhm.
wolves and the sheep and wolves, they've had a huge part of, hunting humans and stuff because they're one of the few that were never scared of us. Same thing with lions, and you get stories like Hounds of Baskerville and all these kind of things in history. So I guess, maybe for me, that's where skinwalkers and werewolves and stuff are cool, because it's like trying to imagine that merger of enemy and prey, yeah, together.
Yeah, hugely. And like then hence then the person turning into these creatures, right? Because they're cursed and they become these wolves or what have you, I think is really, really interesting. And that's why people like, I think, are fascinated by the dogman phenomena, because it's like there's nothing like that recorded anywhere so far in any zoological, anthropological book. You know what I mean? So
Hmm.
why are people seeing these things, and what are they? Where do they come from?
Yeah, yeah, crazy. Crazy. So, Jason, what's next on your agenda? Like, can you talk about anything coming up? Is there some teases you can give us?
He's well, myself and Alexander Petikoff, who's with Small Town Monsters as well, and he does a series called Bigfoot Beyond the Trail, as well as Strange Places. He and I are doing a big project on Vancouver Island. One of them is going to be called a film called Journey to Ape Island. I'm going to kind of do like a special and this being attached to that, and we're going to use the material for like his series and my series as well. Plus, I'm writing a book about it all. So that's kind of the big project for this year for me, all of it out by the end of the year. And then when is this episode dropping, Kenton? What's your date for this to come out?
Uh, you know what? I'm thinking early February for this one. I think will probably be like second week of February.
So should be safe because I have a series also for Small Town Monsters called Sasquatch Quest, which drops February 22nd. Um,
Awesome.
yeah, and it's the first episode drops February 22nd, and it's kind of a continuation of Sasquatch Legacy, but it's like an ongoing monthly series for them delving into Sasquatch, and we spent a lot of time back down at Harrison Hot Springs with like Thomas Steenberg and Jerry Matthews and Brad Trent, and digging really into all the fascinating Sasquatch stories that relate to down there in the Harrison Hot Springs area, which is where the term Sasquatch was born.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Because Bigfoot and all that kind of stuff. But Sasquatch, very much the Canadian term.
it's a Canadian term, and it was around a good 30 years before the term Bigfoot was even coined.
Wild. Wild.
Yeah.
So if anybody wants to like follow along with your journey and learn more about you, what's the best place to look? Where's the best place to go?
I'd follow me on Instagram at Jason Hewlett Official. People keep telling me I need to come up with a website and all that, but I just don't have the time. I'd rather just spend my time working. And then I'm also on Facebook, Jason Hewlett. You can come and find me. I've got the Sasquatch Legacy poster as my cover photo, and that's how you can tell that's me. But yeah, no, that's the easiest places to keep. And then obviously Small Town Monsters through Small Town Monsters as well, their YouTube channel and their main website.
Right. Right on. That's super fun. All right, man. So looking towards the time here, getting close to the end of the episode. And as you might be aware, it's because you said you've listened to a few of these shows. I like to end my interviews by asking one more question.
One more Moore question.
Of course, man. I am all about the puns. I am all about the puns in this show. So one more question. Are you ready, Jason, for your one?
Fire away, sir.
All right. If money and time was no object, and you could visit one famous global mystery or location, what would that be? What would be Jason's dream investigation?
Ooh, that's a good one. So if time and money was not an object,
Correct.
I
Anywhere in the
would
world.
go back to Okanagan Lake, excuse me, and I would bring like submarines and the whole 9 yards. And I'd start at one end of that lake and I'd go to the other end of that lake. And I would also they did it to Loch Ness. They did like a eDNA test. I'd want
Hmm.
to do that as well and
In the
see if we could
water.
get to the bottom of what's going on in Lake Okanagan. Although if you believe the indigenous people, it's a water spirit, so we wouldn't find anything anyways. But it would just be neat to be able to really tackle that, like proper head on, full on, well funded, balls to the wall, sky's the limit investigation on that lake.
Wow. I got to admit to being a little shocked about that, because I was like, I was giving you the full globe to play with, and I was like, I wonder, where he's going to go with this and stuff. And I love that you went to our very backyard.
Yeah.
That's just
Oh yeah.
awesome.
That to me, why? Like, I mean, there's been so many investigations into like Loch Ness and all these other places. Like, I'd rather just go back to somewhere close that means something to me, a story that I grew up with, fascinated by it. I'd really want to just tackle it hard, you know?
Yeah, full. Like I love that submarines and everything. Though, I kind of fear what you might find down there. Not creature wise, but it
Just
just
otherwise.
yeah, just all those Albertan rig pigs that come and rip around the lake at 2 a.m. on their boats.
Yeah, there could be some scary stuff that has nothing to do with lake monsters or anything like that down to the bottom.
Yeah. And by the way, for my brother and all my friends that live in Alberta in the oil industry, I'm not calling you out. Oh man. Well, Jason, awesome to have you join the show, man. Such a pleasure. We'll definitely have to get you back again in the future to talk about future projects. Maybe we'll be talking about some Ape Island and stuff in the future. That'd be awesome. Thanks for coming on. Hope you had a good time.
I did. I had a great time as always, sir. Always a pleasure chatting with you. And yeah, I'd be happy to come back anytime.
Yeah. Story for the win, man. Story for the win.
And there you have it. I hope you enjoyed learning a little bit more about Jason Hewlett and all the cool things that he's done and is doing. Just a side note on Small Town Monsters on YouTube. Look them up on YouTube or on their website. It's Small Town Monsters. Jason just launched last weekend a new Sasquatch docu-series called Sasquatch Quest. Sasquatch Quest. So make sure you go check that out. More than 20,000 views, and it's not even a full week on the online yet. And also check out the Heart of Ice Tracking the Wendigo. Look up his books. Watch his documentaries. They've been absolutely great. I mean, not going to lie, Sasquatch Legacy is kind of my favorite because it's got me in it. Ha ha. And you get to see my library and my Jeep and my backyard and the mystery of my slaughtered chickens, which we still haven't figured out. But anyway, I hope you really enjoyed this episode this week. I want to thank you all personally. 10 episodes is huge for me. I've had so much fun interviewing everybody who's been on this podcast so far. I've been told more than I can shake a stick at that I'm good at this, that I was almost born for it, and everybody that I've interviewed always wants to come back. And I can't thank all of you enough, like all of you that are out there listening. You're the reason I keep doing it. So if you're liking what you hear, please consider supporting me on Patreon at Kenton J. Moore. Look me up, buy my books. If you're into steampunk, you like airship adventures or anything, or if your interest is more aligned with the paranormal and the spooky and the suspenseful, I have a short story collection that's very popular called The Dark Below the Ice and Other Stories. It's 12 short stories written by and inspired by things that I've seen or experienced or grew up afraid of. So anyways, I will call that the end of this episode for this week. Thanks again for listening. Love every one of you. Follow me on socials. Please send me recommendations, comments. If you're interested in joining the show as a guest, go to my website, www.kentonjmoore.com, and fill out the contacts form. May just mention who you are, maybe link to what you've done, and give me some info to reach you and research who you are and what you do. And there we have it, folks. Another Thursday is over, and I will see you next week for more about storytelling.
Fade to black. The end.